reality. One God, one life, one way, one reality. Welcome to In Search for Truth. We are talking about the Noahide Laws. I hope you are joining us. And if you are, we thank you for listening. Today we are actually going to speak about the positive aspect of the laws. Many times when people hear the word law, they think of something that's totally restricting them from doing anything that they would like to do, or for the sake of keeping safety only, and things like that. They don't actually look at a law as a means of growing, trying to learn something from it. So without further ado, y'all remember Jack, and we will begin.
Well, as we discussed, in the last couple of weeks, that most of the time when we do hear the word law, we automatically think about something that just restrains us. But I think you brought up in one of the discussions about, I think you used the words active and proactive or something of that nature.
Proactive and reactive.
Proactive and reactive. Yeah. But, when we talk about the 7 laws, Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noah, which are the 7 laws that are given to the nations, most of the time we talk about those in terms of being laws for society, or societal laws, that allows societies to have a healthy society. In other words, a society doesn't have laws that prevents murder and illicit sex, adultery and so forth, or laws that prevent theft. Well, eventually society cannot exist. In other words, it's going to fade into non-existence. So when we look at the 7 laws, we think about them in some sense as laws that benefit society, but we also have to think about the fact that society itself is made up of individuals. So what benefit does the individual receive from keeping these laws? Well, the first benefit is kind of obvious. You're in a society where you can actually, in some sense, exercise your religious freedom, much like the document that was founded by our forefathers here in America. They actually realized that government was to do one thing and kind of one thing only, and that was to provide a place, a safe haven, I guess, for lack of a better word, where you could actually exercise your inalienable rights. Now, they realized that government couldn't, there were certain rights that were given to us, and they named off basically 3 of them. And that's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, and they said among those inalienable rights. In other words, that doesn't limit, that we just say there's only 3, but among those inalienable rights he talks about in the document of the Constitution. And so they're not limited to just those 3. In other words, there's many other rights that we would have that are God-given rights, inalienable. In other words, the government can't give us certain rights. So what the government is supposed to do is to create a society where individuals can exercise their inalienable rights, in other words, their God-given rights. So when we talk about the 7 laws, we talk about the laws in the sense of a societal type law, but then what is the benefit to the individual? Well, the obvious one of the first benefits is that there's no fear of being murdered, and there's no fear of people stealing from you, no fear of someone committing adultery with your wife, and so forth and so on. But what does that do for the individual that's actually practicing these laws? And then the next question is, what about when we start looking at these laws? And I always, there's a couple of different lists when you go to the Talmud to look at the list. But I've always had my own way of understanding those. So I diverged just a little bit from those lists. And it's a nice way of remembering those. And so it's kind of like remember the 10, right? So the first 2 I put in the category of man's relationship with God. Don't commit adultery. Don't commit idolatry. And the prohibition against blasphemy, right? And then I I go to the prohibition against murder, which I see as the greatest one. The prohibition against sexual immorality, which I kind of connect with that one. And the prohibition against theft, right? And then, as we come on down the line, then of course we have the prohibition against eating the limb of a living animal. And of course then we have the prohibition against setting up, it's really a prohibition against injustice, but we make it a positive to say that we have to have courts of justice. So we all benefit as a society at large, in some sense, from those. But then, what kind of, and I'm going to use this word, let me explain this word. When I use the word perfection, it's needless to say that we're never going to reach the place of being perfect.
Right.
Right? So when I use that word perfection, I'd like for people to understand that we're working toward perfection. Does that mean we're ever going to gain to be a perfect, human being?
You're saying a continual perfection of the self.
Exactly, continual perfection
Not
of the self.
Not a reached goal.
Right.
Not an arrived at goal.
Right. It's not. It's something that you continuously strive for, knowing at the same time that you're never actually going to reach that.
Right.
Right. So it's an effort on our part to continually working toward the perfection that God wants all human beings to be. When we use the word Adam, for example, Adam, which is the first man, Adam came into this world in a state of what we call innocence, not in a state of perfection. He could have evolved into that perfect man, but he failed to, as we know. But sometimes throughout the Tanakh, you will have this word Adam that is used to represent the perfected individual, the truly perfected individual, which we are all striving to do. In Hebrew terms, by the way, it's called tikkun olam, rectification. So we all have a job, we all have a task, not only to rectify ourselves, but in rectifying ourselves, we're also taking part in the bigger picture, and that's the rectification of the world. In other words, we started out in the Garden of Eden, and we ultimately, hopefully, get back to the Garden of Eden. So it's a constantly striving for the ultimate perfection.
Right.
And so this is not only the people of Israel's part, but it's every human being's part, that we're actually working toward this as a goal, steadily. If you look at secular history, I call it secular history kind of runs linear. In other words, they have a starting point, but there's no end goal. There's, it's just going until it ends, or whatever happens to happen. It's kind of que sera, que sera, the old song, whatever will be, whatever it will be. But within Jewish history, Torah history has a starting point, but it also has an ending point. It's secular. It's not running linear. It's a secular history. In other words, mankind starts in the Garden of Eden, and where's his end point? Back to the Garden of Eden. So every individual is working toward perfection as an individual, but at the same time he's also working toward the reconciling of the world, tikkun olam, to bring correction, so that everyone eventually winds back up in the garden.
So what you're saying is that it's every man's duty to try their best to arrive at that level, whether they make it or not.
Exactly.
It's their duty to progress in life and try to make that rectification in their lives, which will eventually make it to the rest of their surrounding.
Yes.
Interestingly enough, I heard of a conversation once that said, I don't think about the things I don't know because I only deal with how I'm being dealt with. And it was almost a way of excusing any recognition of God, any recognition of doing good by others, because they would just deal with people as they were dealt with by those people.